of a series through Philippians that we're doing at the moment, and we're focusing on the back end of Philippians chapter 2. And I'd like to ask you this question. If you could think of people or a person currently or in your past, somebody who's had your back, or somebody that you would like to go into battle with, who would that person be? When our boys were at preschool, Levi was 5 and Ethan was 3. And for that year, they were at the same preschool, and so at break, would play on the same playground. And one day when Jax went to pick up Levi from school, the teacher just had a little chat with her about an incident that had happened on the playground during break time that day. And what had happened is that a little boy named John, literally Johnny, had grabbed Ethan, our 3-year-old, and had shoved him up against the fence. Ethan's older brother, Levi, observing this, ran across and grabbed hold of Johnny, pulled him off his brother, and shoved him up against the fence. So the teacher just wanted to let us know, to her credit, this was her feedback to us. I was very proud of Levi for sticking up for his younger brother. Maybe what he needs to learn to do is talk first before shoving other people into the fence. But I reckon that all of us need people that have got our backs, and if it isn't our biological brother, it's someone in our lives who can grab the bullies that happen, the stuff that happens to us, and say, you know what, I'm standing with you. Even if we can't physically do it, I'm not advocating violence in any form this morning. Just saying we need people that stand with us, that have our backs. Would you turn with me, please, if you have a Bible, to Philippians chapter 2, verse 19 through to verse 30. Wasn't that singing wonderful this morning? Just such a sense of victory and that it's all going to turn out okay. I think that was the main message, that God is on the throne and He's looking out for us. So Philippians 2 verse 19, I hope, Paul writes, in the Lord Jesus, to send Timothy to you soon. Just a reminder, this was a letter written to the church in Philippi by Paul, who was sitting in jail, and he now writes about Timothy. He says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. In other words, when he brings news back. I have no one else like him, Timothy that is, who will show genuine concern for your welfare. For everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I see how things go with me, and I'm confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. Verse 25. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus. Just to get us used to this guy's name, wouldn't you turn to the person sitting next to you and just say, Epaphroditus? It's just got such a nice ring to it. So he says, I think it's necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs with you, longs for all of you. Epaphroditus longs for you, church at Philippi, and is distressed because you heard that he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore, I'm all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. So then, welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him, because he almost died for the work of Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me. So in this passage, right in the middle of the book of Philippians, Paul is speaking about two of his friends and partners in the apostolic work that he did. These two guys, one of them named Timothy, the other one Epaphroditus. Timothy is quite a well-known name in the New Testament. We first read about him in the book of Acts 16 verse 1, and this is our introduction to Timothy. It says, Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. So he came from a multicultural family. Paul was so impressed with this young man that he took Timothy with him, and he became part of Paul's church planting team, or if you like, apostolic team. We read this in 2 Timothy 1 verse 5, a letter that Paul wrote to Timothy at one stage. He says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded now lives in you also. So Timothy came from is like a third generation Christian. His grandmother, his mother had served God, and Paul says that faith that lived in them, I see that in you as well. Sometimes Timothy traveled with Paul. So at this point when he's writing this letter, Paul was physically with Timothy. But there were other times that Timothy was sent by Paul to help out in different geographical locations. The letters that bear Timothy's name, 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, were written by Paul to Timothy when he was in the town of, or the city of Ephesus, saying to him, Timothy, in your work, apostolic work with that local church, these are the things that you need to look out for. And then we come across the second man whose name was referenced in this text. And that was this guy whose name was Epaphroditus. Unlike Timothy, this is the only mention of him in the New Testament. From what we read about him in these few very powerful verses, Epaphroditus was part of the church in Philippi. At one stage, they wanted to send a financial gift to Paul. We read about that in Philippians chapter 4. So they took up a whole lot of money. And Epaphroditus was their messenger, carrying this gift, this financial gift, and he delivered it to Paul. But he didn't go back home straight away. He stayed with him, obviously for quite a while, because Paul is now saying, I think it's necessary to send him back to you. In the interim, he's been very sick. He was really upset that you were upset. He knows that you loved him. He was sorry that you heard that that he was so sick and he almost died, and he did. And Paul says, I'm so grateful that he didn't, because that would have been another sorrow to go on the sorrows I've already had together with me. Epaphroditus was possibly the guy who carried this letter back to the church in Philippians. It could have been sent by somebody else, but it could have been him. But imagine this letter arriving back. And if it was Epaphroditus that carried it, now that Sunday at church, they would have made a big deal out of reading Paul's letter back to the church. And Paul talks about all the good stuff that we've mentioned so far in Philippians 1 and Philippians 2. And then in the middle of the letter, the writer says, I long to send Timothy to you. And everyone thinks, oh, Timothy, remember, he was part of the team that helped start this church in the first place. And then it goes on to say, but I thought it good to send to you Epaphroditus. And the few guys sitting around Epaphroditus high-five him like, yeah, he's one of us. We're so glad to have you back. And then Paul goes on to talk about what an incredible guy Epaphroditus was. But this wasn't just a private message. It was everybody in the church. In fact, 2,000 years later, we're still talking about Epaphroditus and what an amazing teammate and team member he was to Paul. Just some introductory remarks about this passage, two of them that I'd like to make this morning. I ask you to notice, first of all, how personal this piece is that we've just read. Paul's dealt with some quite big theological themes, but here he gets really personal. He mentions two people by name. In other words, there were real friendships that were formed in the doing of the gospel, if I could use that phrase. Paul wasn't just writing a theological letter saying, okay, you guys need to look out for your doctrine and this, and this. He talks with fondness about the people that he was doing life and ministry with. These guys, Timothy and Epaphroditus. Incidentally, when I say the word ministry, I'm not at all meaning those who receive a salary for doing it, because if you've got faith in Christ, all of us, the Bible says, are ministers. We all are advancing God's kingdom. These guys were not just work colleagues. The way that Paul writes about them is not, and the guy in the next door office to me, Timothy, he did quite a great job in the 3 years that he was at Paul Church Planting, Inc. And Epaphroditus, well, he also got a little bit sick, so we are deploying him back to Philippi. Didn't really need a guy like that who got sick. So we sent him. It's not that at all. Can you feel the heart, the fondness, the tenderness that Paul writes about these two guys, Timothy and Epaphroditus? This isn't unique, incidentally, to the book of Philippians. in numerous places throughout the New Testament, Paul writes, for example, at the end of Romans, there's a long list of names. He says, send greetings to that person, send greetings to that person, to that family, to that woman, to those people. Greet all of them. Numerous occasions it writes about Paul's team members, guys that traveled with him and helped him. This brings me to the second thing I ask you to notice from this text is the joy that comes from partnership. The title of the series is A Rebel's Guide to Joy. So on every Sunday we're looking for how does joy work in the book of Philippians. How can you be joy-filled when you're sitting in jail writing a letter? And in this verse that we read a little earlier, it says in Philippians 2:29, so then welcome him in the Lord with great joy. Around this idea of partnership, around this idea of connection, around this idea of doing life and ministry together, Paul says there's great joy in partnership. Honor people like him. Last week we spoke about the joy to be found in community, the joy in connection, the joy in being together. This week takes that idea one step further. There is joy in community, but there is added joy in partnership. Partnership is it's a deeper word. It's a more intentional word than just connection and just community. We first came across this word actually in Philippians 1 in verse 5. Just as a reminder, Paul said this, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. I'd like you just to look at that phrase for just a sec. Joy because of your partnership. This is more than friendship alone, and friendship's certainly the starting point. Joy because of your partnership. When I was preparing this, I was taken back to some of the lectures that I had at university. I did a commerce degree, and I remember them defining what a business partnership was. I couldn't really remember it, so I had, thankfully, Google at my disposal. And this is what the definition is of a business partnership. A partnership is an association between 2 up to 20 people, each of whom agrees to contribute something into the partnership, be it capital, money, skills, goods, or services, in order to conduct an income-generating business and share in the profits or losses of the business. So that's in a business setting, what a partnership is. How does that word and this definition tie into what I think Paul is saying in Philippians? Well, I'd like to highlight 3 words out of that definition. The first word is the word contribute. Well, let's use the phrase, contribute something. A partnership are relationships where something is on the table, where I'm in. Friendship I can have at a distance, but partnership, I'm invested. Business partnership, time, skills, goods, services. Kingdom partnership, I would say, is all in. It's all of the above. Any skills I have, money, time, etc. We've preached about this before, that God actually owns everything, all of us. Partnership is bringing that all to the table and saying with like-minded people, we're together. The second word I'd like to highlight is the word profits, and the third word is the word losses. In a business partnership, there is the possibility of reward, but there's also the potential of risk. That's profits or losses. When it comes to partnership in the gospel, the way Paul's talking about it, I'd like to suggest that there are so many rewards. One of them is joy. We were actually designed to partner together. We weren't just designed to be at arm's length when it came to connection and community. Having said all of that, there's also risk when it comes to partnership because not everything runs smoothly. Not everything always works out exactly how we anticipated. In fact, Paul, in other moments, speaks about being deserted by some of his friends. In 2 Timothy 4 verse 10, he writes to Timothy and he says this, do your best to come to me quickly, for Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. So if Epaphroditus was publicly praised for being such a good teammate, imagine being this guy Demas. From when the Bible was written up till now, his name has been recorded as the buddy that deserted Paul. And the reason is given because he loved the world. In other words, he lost sight of partnership and the joy and the investment and the reward and the risks that come with partnering. So I'm not trying to paint this in such rose-colored spectacles that it's like partnership in the gospel is all just violins and angels. It all works out fine. Sometimes there's pain and sometimes it doesn't. But I ask you to notice this morning that Paul doesn't let the potential for pain detract from the idea that we were designed to partner together, that there is joy in partnership, in contributing something, in the profits, if you like, the rewards as well as the risks. I wonder if you remember the time when Jesus called his early followers. They were involved in business. 4 of them, 2 sets of brothers, they were fishermen. And Jesus, in a conversation with them, said, leave everything and follow me. In other words, put it all in. Come and let's partner together. And he said, and I will make you fishers of men. In other words, I will add to the skills that you already have with things that have got eternal benefit. These men gave up everything. It cost them. There were risks involved. There was journey that went along with it. But imagine if at that moment they had have said, you know what, Jesus, it's all good. Thank you. We acknowledge you. You're a good man. But we'd prefer just to hang on to what we've got. We're not investing. We're not putting in. We're not buying in, if you like, in inverted commas, to what you're offering us. We'd just rather do it by ourselves. What a tragedy that would have been. The guy that I'd really like to hone in on this morning is this man Epaphroditus, though. We could say a lot more about Timothy, but I'd like to speak about Epaphroditus. Paul uses an incredible verse or series of words to describe this man of whom we know nothing else apart from what I've just read to you. He says this, Epaphroditus, my brother, my co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger. And I'd like to speak around for a few minutes around those 4 different phrases, the 4 different words that Paul uses to apply to this guy. He calls him, first of all, Epaphroditus, who is my brother. In other words, we have got a bond, we've got a connection. There is love that flows between us. This is more than just, hey, bro. This is Epaphroditus, who is like a brother. There is a strong connection. This is far more than just being members of the same club. We happened to go to the same places, so we ended up getting to know each other. That's where I know Epaphroditus from. Through the gospel, through the local church, it's possible to have friendships and connection and partnerships that go way beyond, I just know that person from being in the same place at the same time. The bond and the connection of working together, of going through some hardships together, of finding that we share a common interest, even if we didn't come from the same biological family. The love that we share, the connection is we are like brothers and sisters. And this is a phrase that the Bible uses over and over again. I think it's possible to make far too little of that phrase. And to say, well, just brothers and sisters, da-da-da. When Paul writes words like that, he's trying to help us understand that the church was designed to love each other and to care for each other and to form deep and meaningful friendships. Now, there's a massive difference between a nuclear biological family and a church family that's this big. It's impossible for us all to know each other to the same degree. It's impossible for us all to care equally for each person. We physically, not a single one of us has the capacity to know and care for each one or for everyone. And yet we're still called brothers and sisters. And how I think it works, certainly how I see it working, is that our pockets of friendship and community, you can maybe have somewhere between, 10 and 40 or 50 connections. The first number, the earlier number, is the amount that we can really meaningfully connect with and know and care. But those circles overlap, and the circles provide the strength. And we try and facilitate some of this with our life groups. We've got 165, might be a few more now, life groups that meet throughout the city, week in, week out. And my experience of being part of groups is that you arrive as relative strangers, but over time you start to bond, and there's deep friendships and connections that start to happen, and we start to do life together. I think it's also possible, I'm just commenting on a possible line of thought that can go too far this way, is that our expectations on others can be too high. And so we spend more time thinking about what they didn't do for me, what bad brothers and sisters they were to me. I spend more time thinking about that than how was I brothering or sistering to others? How was I showing love? Paul speaks about Epaphroditus as a brother. I understand that to be somebody that he was keen to hang out with. Share some coffee together, have a meal together. He doesn't use that as his only word, he uses 3 others. But as a starting point, I'd like to ask you, how much do you consider yourself to be a brother or sister of the church family? Or is the full extent of your partnership in the gospel just attending a meeting? Because if all it is simply attending a meeting, maybe arriving a couple of minutes after the start, leaving a couple of minutes before it finishes, I'd like to suggest that that falls far short of the possible joy that you and I should and could have by partnering, working together in the gospel. Which brings us to the second word that Paul uses for Epaphroditus. He says he was my brother and he was my co-worker. We didn't just hang out and do coffee together. We also worked together. This guy was willing to roll up his sleeves and get in the trenches. He was willing to expend energy, is how I read that phrase. He was not just a taker, but he was a giver. He brought his energy into the table. Earlier on, he references Timothy and he says, I have no one else like Timothy who shows a genuine concern for people. One of the reasons why he praises these men, I think, is because they were willing to work. They're willing to get involved. They're willing to do something. Now, please don't misread this. I don't think Paul was meaning Epaphroditus was so good at serving me, Paul. And every time I wanted a drink, Epaphroditus would go and give me a drink because I was the preacher and he was your messenger. So I don't think he means that. I think it means together we did life. Together we did what we needed to do. God was showing us to do some stuff, and Epaphroditus was with me. We got stuck in and we got involved together, so he was my brother. We hung out together, but more than that, he was a co-worker. We labored together. We expended energy together. How would you rate yourself on brotherliness, if I could use that word, and co-workerness? In terms of partnering together with the gospel, do we roll up our sleeves and get involved some way, somehow doing something? Or have circumstances, pain, etc., allowed us to just stand a distance and say, no, thank you. I'm happy just to be part of, from the edge, but no more than that. The third thing Paul says about this man, Epaphroditus, he says he was my brother, he was my co-worker, and he was my fellow soldier. It's quite possible that while Epaphroditus was with Paul, the stuff went down that ended up Paul in jail. Maybe Epaphroditus was imprisoned as well. We don't know any about that, but there were certainly lots that went wrong. This wasn't just a little tour of the churches that Paul had planted and it was all just happiness. No, people were very upset with Paul, the authorities that is, and had him jailed, quite probably in Rome. So Epaphroditus is there, and Paul says, this guy that came from your church, and we connected. We connected well. We were brothers together, but we also worked together. But I have to tell you about Epaphroditus. It didn't stop there. He was also a fellow soldier. And I love that phrase. It means we understood we had a common enemy. Not other people, but Paul writes later in Ephesians, principalities and powers. The devil is out to destroy lives. And together, Epaphroditus and I and all the other guys in our team, we realized we've got a common enemy. That's why we needed to work together to advance the cause of Christ. Another way that I interpret this phrase, fellow soldier, is that Epaphroditus wasn't the guy that was going to stab me in the back. And he wasn't the guy that was going to abandon me when times got a little tough. Quite the opposite. He stuck with me. He says, I'm basically having to force him to go back home to Philippi because even through sickness and in health and all the troubles we had, etc., he was there. Epaphroditus was a guy that you could count on when troubles came. And the fourth thing that he says, Epaphroditus was your messenger. As well as being a brother, co-worker, fellow soldier, he also understood that he had a message to carry. Now, in this context, the message that he had to carry was from the church in Philippi saying, hey, Paul, we're thinking of you. We took up an offering. There is a financial gift. And that was the message that he carried. Paul writes about that quite extensively in Philippians 4. But I'd like to ask you, what is the treasure that every single one of us carry if we have faith in Christ? Surely it's the message of Christ. Surely it's the relationship that we have with Christ that provides the treasure that we realize I've got to do more with this than just hang on to it. I've got to do more than just hang out doing coffee together, although that's absolutely part of it. I need to work and be a fellow soldier and remember that I'm always a messenger carrying the treasure of Christ together with me. It's very possible to do the first one well, brother, the second well, average, co-worker, fellow soldier, to get by, and yet to ignore the idea that I'm also a messenger. I've heard so many different people comment on why they don't share their faith with anybody else. They don't invite other people. Some of the reasons go along these lines. I don't know what to say. I'm scared of saying the wrong things. I have the wrong kind of personality for that. My gifting is to help people who already know Christ. To all of those things, I don't think those are valid excuses to hang on to the treasure and the cure. That would be like saying, I discovered the cure for cancer. But because I'm the wrong personality type, whatever that is, I don't know that there is a wrong one. Because of my wiring, I'm a slightly quieter person. I'm not going to tell any cancer sufferers about the cure that I discovered. I'm not sure that I can answer all the biological questions around cancer, so I'm not going to talk about the cure. The good news is we don't need to have all the answers. We just need to care. Care for people, love people, connect with people, be friendly. As somebody once put it, just be nice. That's one of the best ways of carrying the message, being nice. Looking for opportunities to invite people along to church, invite them to life groups, an alpha course. The men's event is coming Wednesday night. Tony is a brilliant guy. If you've got friends who are totally weirded out by the idea of going to church, a church meaning singing songs, anything like that, Tony is about the most unreligious pastor that I've ever met. I was asked by someone on the way out last Sunday morning, did he really mean we've got to bring our gum guards? That was just a joke, okay? There will be some activity happening that includes, you need to come and see what it is to find out. But you don't need your gum guard, or if you have your medical aid card, always wise to bring that along. So Paul says about Epaphroditus, he was my brother, my co-worker, my fellow soldier, who is also your messenger. And then down at the bottom, he says, so then welcome him in the Lord with great joy and honor people like him. I don't want this to just be a theoretical message, that we look at that and we draw some application. This is saying honor people who are brothers and who connect and who work and who fight soldier together and who are messengers and who team up. I think what Paul's saying there with honor people like him is don't take for granted the people that we connected with who do such incredible work, some of it and so much of it invisible to us, but visible to God. I started reading this text and just thinking and writing down some names of different people that we partner with outside of this church, and then thinking, and I actually tapped out because of the incredible number of people that I know in this church. Many of you I don't know, just capacity-wise can't know, but who love the gospel and who partner and who co-work and fellow soldier. I started thinking about Eric and Jill, who 30-something odd years ago, in a step of faith, decided to start this church. And those seeds of faith have grown up to bear fruit that includes all of us here today. The Bible says, honor people like them. We honor you today, Eric and Jill. Peter and Karen, who took over the leadership of this team from them. Their daughter and son-in-law, and for 17 years led this church and led this team. I want you to know that not just what I'm saying here, but we've got a lot to do with Peter and Karen. We're financially invested in what they do. As a church, any money that you give, EFT offering, we are supporting what they are doing with apostolic work, planting churches all over the place. We value their input here. We value them as people. We value what they did here, and we value what they're doing now. Just on the subject of finances, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. I don't know who gives what in terms of the church finances, but to every single person here who partners with us financially. And I say partners, and we all partner together, because when we've spoken about finances, this isn't a teaching on that, but we know that God rewards us for our sowing and our tithing. The Bible's big on that. But I hope that you see when I read that feedback from Alpha, that if you're financially partnering with City Hill Church, that is what it's allowing us to do, is to see people's lives changed. There are so many different things that this church is involved in all over the place that are involved with changing lives. Thank you for your partnership. I was thinking of these two couples seated here, Mel and Jen, who have been in this church for so many years. Graham and Pat, who are on staff together with us as church-paid elders. The incredible love that you have for this church. The incredible work, Mel and Jen, that you do leading the entire school setup. All the work and the energy and the pain and all the stress that comes with all of that. And how often you just tear up when it comes to individuals and their needs and problems, and the deep heart of compassion that you guys have. And Graham and Pat, I want to honor you this morning. You guys are brothers, co-workers, fellow soldiers and messengers. Last weekend, Graham, you're up in Lesotho. You got this passion for the nations. The amount of people that you help during a week is phenomenal. The energy that you put in behind the scenes, the things that you guys take care of, I appreciate it. We want to honor you this morning. I was thinking when I was writing names, I know I'm stepping out of the light, not so good for the video camera, but Tim and Delise. Dozens of couples like Tim and Delise. I'm just picking on them this morning. The incredible heritage of faith that your family, your children, your grandchildren have. The years that you served in this church. You high capacity people that have led in so many different areas. Yet not many people will know this, but every single Monday morning, Tim gives up of his time together with other volunteers to come and count the collection in a closed office door to help us steward our finances well. Tim and Delise, we honor people like you. I saw Trish here this morning. I don't know if Howard's here as well. Three generations of Howard's in Mozambique with the mission team this morning. But I was just thinking of your incredible family. Trish, if you could pass this on to Howard as well. Your three incredible children. I see Helen sitting there. Just the faith, the energy, the passion that you've got, the way that you guys have helped so many people, the passion, Trish, that you've got for people that have been seriously disadvantaged, and the energy that you've put together with your teaching training into helping kids midweek. I want to honor people, not just like you, I want to honor you guys this morning. This church is so full of people everywhere, here this morning, not here this morning. Life group leaders that week in and week out, you're getting together, using tea, coffee, water, toilet flushes, toilet paper, all the expendable stuff, because community is important. And sometimes it's painful when people leave your group and go and join another one, and yet you keep on serving and keep on involved. I know every person this morning who volunteers in the hundreds of different spots that we've got every single Sunday. Kids ministry team who aren't in here but who change the lives of our children by inputting and loving and just being there, being present. Carolyn is seated over there. Her husband Kevin's up in the box. I wanted to honor you guys this morning. Carolyn's on full-time staff with us. Kevin's part-time staff overseeing all the production. I don't know many more people more servant-hearted than you guys. Carolyn had a management job at another firm, high pressure, high stress, and she felt God laid on her heart that there was a particular position that opened up at the church. She said, I just feel God's nudging there. Pete Comrie looked at her CV. He actually didn't even make contact. He just said she's so overqualified for that position. Salary-wise, they're in totally different ballparks. And the long story cut short, Carolyn is part of our staff, and I want to honor you guys this morning. Your service behind the scenes, your love for God's people, your willingness to help, to get here early, to leave late. Kev, the incredible job you do with production. I want to honor you this morning. I want to thank you for all that you guys do. I had a hesitation in naming people by name this morning, and it was this: is all the others that could and should be named publicly, and I just can't for the sake of time. Patrice and Ingrid, Ernie and Anne, Mark and Taryn, just the list is just on and on and on. Paul and Natasha, people who loving Christ, serving Him, following Him. This passage in Philippians is encouraging us to reflect and pause. It says, honor people like them. Whatever them is, people who've got partnership, skin in, on the table, involved. I would like to ask you this morning as an application for this message, 2 questions. The first question is this: are you partnering in the gospel? I think I've got it somewhere there on one of the next slides. Do I understand partnering in the gospel? Am I connected somewhere? Am I building friendships? True godly friendships for me are friendships where there's giving and receiving of love. The giving and receiving of input. It's not just one-way traffic. It's not only coming my way or going from me. There's an openness, a connectedness. Partnership is even more than that, is to say, am I invested? Are there other people in this church who actually rely on me being there somewhere at some time? Am I volunteering somewhere? Are my finances invested, my time, my energy? I hasten to say this, it looks different for each one of us. Partnership doesn't look like something and then we just copy it out. Mark and Megan Feelers, oh man, anyway, let me just finish my 2 points here. John and Debs, everybody. But am I partnering? Am I invested? And am I involved? I feel like this might be a message for some people here this morning that you've been hurt, you've been burned through over-involvement, or you've misused your time, or felt like other church leaders somehow took advantage of you somewhere, somehow. Your responsibility before God is what you do with the rest of your life. Has nothing to do with them, or dare I say with us. But as we partner together, I say, regardless of the pain, the desertion that Paul had, that I feel that pain, I'm not going to let that stand in the way of potential joy, of partnering, of connecting, of buying in. The second question I'd like to ask for each one of us this morning is, are we vocal in our appreciation of those around us? Are we vocal in our appreciation of others? One of the best antidotes to self-pity, one of the best antidotes to just about any difficulties that I'm experiencing emotionally, is to get out and to say a few thank yous to others for what they've been and what they've done. I mentioned all our life group leaders. What about all of us that are in life groups? When was the last time you sent your life group leader a message? It just says, I want you to know, whatever it is, that what you're doing really matters to me. I want to thank you for the impact you've had on the life of me and my family. Just send a little chunky message. Or pick up the phone or show appreciation in some way. It means a big deal when we show appreciation. All of the volunteers involved in so many different areas. The team leader that gets there a little bit before you to help set things up. When last did you say thank you? Just show some appreciation. I'm not just speaking about those leading teams, but what about those around us? Almost every one of us would be able to look at somebody else and say, you know, that person has had a big impact on my faith. Somehow. Are you vocal in your appreciation of that person? And if the idea that just went through your head when I said that is, well, I don't want them to get big-headed. Could I say this very kindly? Then you've got some issues. If that's your concern, if that's our concern. Boy, Paul is this is public praise. It's not like, okay, dear church in Philippi, from Paul and Timothy, all the doctrine, and then his little side note. No, he says, and Epaphroditus and Timothy, these are my buddies, my co-workers, my fellow soldier. This guy, let's acknowledge him, let's high five. Can you see, it's like out there. He's vocal. Not just shy in his praise. Oh, gee, I hope Epaphroditus doesn't get big-headed. The next 2,000 years, people are going to be reading what an incredible guy he was. So, am I being vocal in my appreciation of others? And am I becoming more and more a better brother, co-worker, fellow soldier, and messenger? In my connection with others, am I growing? Am I reaching out? Am I helping? Am I looking for ways to partner in the gospel?